Hello, and welcome to the Guarneri podcast. This is podcast number 9. So, yesterday we spoke a bit about offshoots and continuation organizations of the Golden Dawn, the original one of the late 1890s and early 1900s. First, I just want to get back to the fact. Yes, I know this is supposed to be a podcast and my research and work about mental health, about using ancient ways and practices and occult ways and practices and basically anything alternative to try to find a way to level up our minds, provide some supplemental relief to anxiety and depression. I have not lost sight of that, but I just figured it's going to be very helpful um, for you understanding what I'm researching, the fields and the groups and whatnot. That way, when I make a recommendation, you kind of, hey, try this out. You know that where it came from, how I came up with it and just, pull it out of thin air or something, you know what it was based upon. So, today I want to start off with a few more organizations. These are the ones related to Aleister Crowley, who was quite the character. So, Aleister was, if you remember, he was a member of the Golden Dawn. Um, and he was involved in the whole schism that the Golden Dawn experienced. While McGregor Mathers was out in Paris in France, setting up the temple there and spending a lot of time there. Um, at that point, Aleister Crowley was ready to advance to the inner order, and all the folks in London um, who were able to promote him to the inner order, initiate him into it, refused to. They did not like him. Um, Most people, it seemed like, didn't really like him once they got to know him. So Crowley took off to Paris to visit Mathers and buddied up with him, and Mathers himself initiated Crowley into the second order. And they were kind of buds after that, and you know they had a plan for taking out the folks in the leadership in the London Temple. Um, and that's when the whole thing fell apart with the Golden Dawn. But that wasn't the end of Aleister Crowley. It wasn't the end of um, the groups he belonged to and ran, and um, what he believed in. So Aleister Crowley actually founded a religion called the Lima. Um, and this religion is based upon a book he quote unquote wrote called the Book of the Law. This book, he claims, um, was actually transmitted to him, that he received from an otherworldly entity, maybe his guardian angel, called something like Alwys. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. He just transcribed it, wrote it down. You know, I don't know if that's true or not. I think most people believe it isn't. Maybe it was just the amount of drugs in his system, and you know, he heard voices or something as he wrote it. I have no idea. But in any case, that's what he claimed, that it was transmitted to him by another otherworldly entity. And that book of the law turned into a religion called Thelema. Um, Thelema is still practiced today. You can find Thelemic churches and go to their masses. Yeah, they're still around and going strong. So Aleister Crowley joined two groups in the late 19 O's, 19 odds, I guess they call it. Um, one of which was called the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO for short, which was run by a man named Theodore Royce. Um, Aleister Crowley got pretty high up in the organization and was right under Royce's wing. So the OTO was very connected to Freemasonry, and you actually had to be a Freemason in order to join the OTO. But when Theodore Royce died, Aleister Crowley assumed control of the OTO and made some pretty significant changes. The group basically became about Crowley's Thelema religion. The OTO then was dealing with Thelemic rituals, religious masses, did some magic, but it was Aleister Crowley, his beliefs basically being espoused through the organization. Whether that was good or not or bad, no, it's up to anyone's opinion. But one good thing that he did do um, was he got rid of the ties to Masonry. So anybody could join the OTO. You didn't have to be a Freemason, which in turn also opened up the organization to women. So that was definitely a good thing. Probably a little bit ahead of his time with that. Crowley also formed another group, another Thelemic related group called Astrum Argentum, which translates from the Latin to silver star. So AA, Astrum Argentum, not Alcoholics Anonymous, um, was purely a spiritual and magical academic based organization. It was all about learning and practicing the magic and the skills, not as much about rituals and masses and everyday Thelemic worship. Um, and you really didn't know anybody. It wasn't like a group that got together. You only knew your mentor, the person who brought you into the group and supervised you and helped you, who would usually be one level above you. You only knew that person, and then eventually when you advance far enough to have your own student under you, somebody maybe you brought in, you would know them. But in theory, you should never really know more than 2 people in the organization. That's how it worked. Um, and, the Astrum Argentum, like I said, was all about the Lima in the end, and it was made up of 3 orders. Their first order was basically the exact teachings of the Golden Dawn. Crowley brought them over. It was magic, Kabbalah, alchemy, astral planes, etc. It was straight Golden Dawn. The second order had its own name. It was called the Order of the Rosy Cross, and that order was total Thelemic teachings. And their third order was the Silver Star, and that was for doing advanced work of one's own volition. Basically, if you reached that level, you were on a much higher spiritual plane and you knew what you were supposed to research, basically. That's what it came out to be. So, in the end, Aleister Crowley had 2 different organizations espousing his religion of Thelema. Um, it's really interesting. I've tried to read a little excerpts of the Book of the Law. Man, is it confusing. Man, do you have to read between the lines and figure out, the symbolism and whatever else. There was even, I think I heard this, there was one part of the book, one passage that people were asking Aleister Crowley about what it meant, and he said he didn't even know. He basically skipped over it, he had no clue what it meant, and he wrote it, or if you wanna believe it, he received it from transmission. But in any event, um, ODO I'm sorry, OTO, it still exists. Um, there's one in New York City, not too far from me. They have regular masses and social get-togethers and whatnot. And as far as the AA, they're still around in different forms too. Um, there's a group out in California um, who runs a college for it. And it's still around, and all the materials are published once again. Some people prefer to go to a school or a course in it because it's all nice and neatly organized. But you could just as easily pull all the writings off the internet and figure out the order they're supposed to go in and do the same thing. It's just more work, not as user friendly, and it might want user friendly considering how convoluted and difficult the writings are to get to the bottom of. So, in any event, those are Aleister Crowley's organizations. Um, Tomorrow, I want to discuss modern Druidry, or what's called Renaissance Druidry. Um, I would definitely categorize that as a cult and alternative. Um, and I think it's definitely worth bringing that up. I'm actually a member of two Druid organizations, and I'm going to talk a little about those. So until tomorrow, stay well.